Yeah, believe it or not, the Russians are actively engaged in these issues, and the Russian people are well informed. I will admit that while I was in the Donbas region, the internet, of course, was very, very spotty, deliberately so. My phone had to be actually turned off and put in a Faraday cage to prohibit any signals. I wasn't allowed to take photographs using my phone because of the geolocation aspect of it. So even if I published the photograph later, the metadata on it could provide intelligence to the Ukrainians. So I was in a dark zone from an information standpoint in terms of what was going on in the world. But because the trip ended early, I ended up back in Moscow and got to spend a couple days, debriefing and then also relaxing. Got to tour some museums, but it also gave me time to catch up on the news. So I am pretty well informed about what's going on. Let me put it this way: the Iranians first presented what is the MOU today back in April. It's the same document. The Iranians haven't budged their position. Donald Trump, of course, refused to sign it back in April and agree to it because it was sort of much it was a surrender document. The United States was being compelled to accept Iran's terms and conditions. I want to remind people what a surrender looks like. Let's go back in World War II, September. Tokyo Bay, the USS Missouri, where the Japanese had to come and sign a surrender document unconditionally. They didn't get to debate, negotiate, or otherwise. General Krebs in Berlin went to Chuikov, his Soviet counterpart, and said, "I'd like to negotiate the surrender of the German garrison of Berlin." And Chuikov said, "There will be no negotiations. You can surrender unconditionally. That's your only option, that or die." And the Germans ended up surrendering unconditionally. And so, here are the Iranians that Trump is trying to make it seem like the Iranians have to bend to his will. And the Iranians are like, we won the war. Again, I want to remind people, Iran was in control of the battle space at the end of the war. They had dominated completely. Their air defense had confused the United States to the point that we just couldn't continue to send aircraft over Iran because they were going to get shot down. Even the Israelis were like, it's not the zone that we thought it was. The rear area is no longer safe. Israel had run out of air defense systems to the point where the airfields that their fighters were operating from had become vulnerable because Israel can no longer saturate the skies with air defense. They were just out of it, and the Iranians weren't out of missiles. So this war ended with Iran in the dominant position. It was the United States and Israel that were seeking an end to the conflict. Iran went along with it because, of course, what country doesn't want to end a war and harm to its people? But Iran didn't lose this war. They won this war. And so Iran had its conditions, and their conditions aren't unreasonable, but they were articulated in April. Trump refused them because it made it look too much like a surrender. The document that Trump signed in Versailles is the same document the Iranians presented back in April. It's a surrender document. This is the reality. Donald Trump surrendered to Iran, but he can't admit it. The other thing, though, is that the document really doesn't talk about much in terms of details because all the important issues are kicked off for 60 days of negotiations. The document creates a foundation of behavior that's supposed to be sustainable for 60 days while the fine print is worked out. The United States is incapable of adhering to this document. As Sergei Lavrov has pointed out, the foreign minister of Russia, the United States is agreement incapable. And this is the truth. Vladimir Putin now acknowledges that Donald Trump deceived him through the summit in Alaska, because the United States can't tell the truth. We never can be honest about what we want. What we want is total victory. And the Iranians aren't going to concede this. This is just the reality of it. The Iranians, one of the clauses of the memorandum of understanding is that, there can be no threats or coercion. All Donald Trump does is threaten and coerce. Every time he says the threat he's going to bring back bombing, he's violating the MOU that he himself signed, which means that one violation makes the whole document null and void. The Iranians have already walked out once because of the threats of Donald Trump. And the other thing is that when the Iranians say that Lebanon is part of this agreement, the United States signed to it through the MOU, Donald Trump's signature in Versailles, the Iranians are serious about it. The United States isn't. The United States is like, well, we got a ceasefire, but hey, let Israel and Lebanon do their own thing. You and I will do our own. The Iranians, no, you've got to understand Lebanon is an extension of this, and it's all or nothing for us. And now Donald Trump has to accept the reality that he has to bring the Israelis to heel in Lebanon, or else he doesn't have a deal. And for Donald Trump, the only deal he wants right now, the only thing he's focused on, is keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. It's essential for him to have oil flowing through that because, look, the head of Chevron came out with a warning a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, actually, that said that, the world is going to experience a global energy crisis like it's never experienced before, because you can't deny the global market 22% of its daily flow and not have long-term impact. And the bottom line is, there's a lot of oil on ships that can go in, and we had excess capacity on shipping out there that could buy time, go in there and keep oil going. The Russians were able to send oil, but we're out of that. And so now we're going to run into a period of time. There's nothing that can happen to change us. There's no miracle oil going to appear where there's going to be no oil and the world's economy is going to take a hit. Our economy is going to take a hit. This summer is going to be an interesting summer. Trump needs Strait of Hormuz to open up so that oil flow begins to hit the American economy around September, where we can get an uptick in economic activity. Trump would go, see, I'm the greatest president in the world. I'm the man that improved the American economy. I should be voted, my party should be voted for. And he's hoping for an outcome in November that's positive. That's what this is all about. Trump can't afford to go back to war against Iran, because if Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, remember, every day that it gets shut down and oil isn't going through, that's a day closer to midterm elections. And even though we're in June, you're going, well, midterm elections are till November. I'm telling you right now that the economy will not turn around until September. And if you push it to October, you're getting too damn close to the election. And so Donald Trump knows this. And this is why you're going to see the United States doing what it can to keep the strait open. But we're in agreement incapable. We're not going to get a sound negotiation on nuclear or anything, because it would require Donald Trump to allow the Iranians things that he said won't allow, like enrichment. Well, now he's come out and said, well, maybe they can enrich a little bit here. But now that nuclear dust, the 60% enriched uranium that he claims he blew up to smithereens, that has to be turned over to America. No. So now that has to be turned over to America and China. The Iranians are saying, no, it's ours and we'll take care of it. And we can supervise. But, the thing is, Donald Trump's going to get nothing of what he wants except the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Why? Because it's in the interest of Iran to also be able to get their oil to market, get their economy up and running, and make themselves sanctions proof. Because basically the United States is an empty suit at this point in time, a paper tiger. We can't follow through with the threats of Donald Trump, and Iran knows this. So they're going to be busy building economic relationships with Russia, China, India, Asia, the whole world except Europe and the United States, and they're going to thrive. And then once the midterm elections go through, Donald Trump isn't going to be able to engage, because remember, a key aspect of all Trump's thinking is the security guarantees that the United States bring, but can only bring if we're economically engaged. Remember Ukraine? We have to get those, the rare earth minerals, and we have to be in there. And the idea is that if we're in there engaged, there can't be a war because we're engaged. Well, Donald Trump, guess who read your little briefing? Russia and China. They're going to be engaged with Iran like you've never seen engagement with Iran. And at that point in time, it's going to be impossible for the United States to resume the conflict. So this is what's in it for Iran, because people say, well, why wouldn't Iran just continue to squeeze the Strait of Hormuz? Well, the answer is that if they do that, remember, China is sympathetic to Iran to a point. But I've said this before, but it's become even more important. It's the economy, stupid. That's James Carville's little magic words that he put on a yellow sticky note, put up on a door at the war room of the Clinton campaign in 1992, when Clinton thought that he could engage in geopolitical discussions with George Herbert Walker Bush, the victor of Desert Storm. And Carville's like, no, you'll lose. It's the economy, stupid. Focus on that. And Clinton did, and he won. China is sympathetic to Iran, but it's the economy, stupid, and Iran knows this. If Iran does things out of national pride that end up economically hurting China, China isn't going to commit suicide on behalf of Iran. And so Iran knows that it has to engage China constructively, economically, in a sustainable fashion in order for China to, solidly stand beside it. It's the same with Russia. So the Iranians are going to make certain compromises to guarantee that the Hormuz Strait will be open. They could shut it down with all the violations that take place. But I think that there's an understanding that the global economic stability is the goal, is the objective, even if Israel screws it up. Because I think Israel, again, I just remind people that Hezbollah has beaten them before. People tend to not study history, but in 2000, Hezbollah kicked them out of southern Lebanon. And they're going to do it again. Hezbollah is winning this conflict. Israel is going to lose. Israel will be compelled to leave southern Lebanon. Benjamin Netanyahu will collapse. Israel will eat itself. And so Israel is one of these self-solving problems. And Iran's not going to commit suicide or trying to force an issue that's happening. It's the same thing with, why doesn't Putin attack Europe? Well, I told you, I gave a speech called Shoot the Dog. And you're going to say, well, Scott, you said shoot the dog. Putin agrees with me. Shoot the dog. But he doesn't have to shoot the dog. What happens if you can get the dog to shoot itself? Which is what's happening. The rabid dog called Europe is killing itself. Look at Keir Starmer, one of the ultimate rabid dogs. He's not going to be prime minister. He resigned. Why? Collapsing. Britain is doing to itself what Russia would seek to want to happen if there was a war: economic collapse, political collapse, societal collapse. Russia doesn't have to do a damn thing. Britain is killing itself. They're shooting themselves. Germany, Wirtz, the chancellor, shooting himself. Macron, shooting himself. Shoot the dog is the solution. Europe is a rabid dog, but we're just blessed with the fact that the dog is shooting itself. And Russia doesn't need to attack Europe and change the dynamic. Russia is winning this war. Don't let the Ukrainian drone strikes divert you. This is one great big distraction. 500 drones were sent against Moscow. 8 got through. That means the Russian air defense is working, but you can oversaturate it. But when they got through, what did they get? They got a sound and light show. Boom, bam, and the flipping lid, and then the Ukrainian defense minister can show his little video with all the chortling little German weasels looking at it, going, oh, boom. And then what? The fire got out. Moscow doesn't care. Moscow doesn't care. I was in Moscow when this happened. I'm telling you right now, the people of Moscow. I made a sarcastic video, put it on my Telegram channel about people running in the streets in fear. There's no fear in Moscow. Boom, okay. And there's no follow-up. It's not an existential. When Russia makes things go boom in Kiev, the whole damn city knows about it, and it's existential in nature. Right. There's, the way social media portrays this conflict is just lunacy. And the way that the mainstream media portrays this conflict is lunacy. Are the Ukrainians having an impact on Russia? Yeah, of course they are. You don't flood the zone with that many drones and not have an impact. Is Russia feeling pain? Yes, of course it is. But it's not existential pain. It's like a hangnail. Hurts. When you take a step, it's like, damn, that hurt. But I'm not amputating the foot, let alone the leg, let alone checking in the hospital and being euthanized. I'm continuing with my life, functioning and thriving. And that's what Russia's doing, functioning and thriving.
Well, I think those are really good points, Scott. And I think to both conflicts, for Iran, I think it's a pretty great compromise to be saddled with Oman together to regulate the Strait of Hormuz and have that control, like the last case resort the last resort that you have to close the Strait of Hormuz if things get really bad, if there is some kind of real threat, existential threat to you. But to be able to, and this is the United States will not be able to question this. Oman and Iran are already negotiating this together, that they are going to.
But that the United States, Trump says that that's not going to happen.
Right. He said, oh, it's not happening. And this is what I want to ask you about.
It already happened, Donnie, baby. It's done. A done deal. You weren't invited to the party because, let me think about it. You lost the war. Losers don't get invited to the victory table. Iran and Oman are establishing the rules of the. And the interesting thing too is, and here you might correct me because I could be off on this. I haven't had a chance to dig deeply into it. But my understanding is that the major insurance companies still aren't insuring shipping through the Strait of Hormuz because of the insecurity brought about by the inconsistency of the American position. But the Iranians and the Omanis are offering short-term transit insurance, saying that we will guarantee your shipping. And so, they're stepping in and filling. So they're doing things and they're raising money. I think Trump even said they potentially raise $500 million a month in additional income. Well, baby, Yeah. And, that gets Donald Trump's attention because he, of course, is the ultimate, grifter, and he's always looking for a scam. And he's like, I want a piece of that action. I love this man. When I say I love it, I mean, I love the consistency of his lunacy.
Right.
Because, we can't allow the Iranians to do this. It's a crime. It's highway robbery. But if I can get in on the scheme, and then it's a good deal. So if America can get a piece of the action, I mean, he is just the ultimate criminal mind. This is literally one of the greatest, and I don't mean that in a good sense, criminal minds in history, who's the president of the United States. And he runs the United States as an organized crime family. I mean, it's the way we run today. It's not, this isn't normal. This isn't normal. This isn't the way America is supposed to operate.
And the spin, I feel like on both, there's a lot of spin happening right now for both conflicts. Literally, I think, as you said, the consistency of Donald Trump is the lunacy. The way that the Iran conflict is being spun is far harder to believe, and the poll numbers are showing it for the United States, where every concession that is being admitted to is being told that it will all come back to the United States, right? All of Iran's oil that is going to go through the Strait of Hormuz, that's going to sail out of the Persian Gulf and into the global markets, all coming back to the United States. The lifting of sanctions, or the relief on sanctions for this amount of time, this short amount of time, all of it is going to go toward the United States. All the farmers in the U.S. are going to sell all their stuff, all their foods to Iran. And you made the great point that, well, actually, Russia and Iran are pretty good partners with a pretty good track record for not doing what the United States does. And Iran has said, we choose our partners based on what we need and what we want to do, not what the United States says. So there's that spin. And then with the Ukraine conflict, I feel like the spin now is, wow, look at those drones filled with kerosene, and look at them flood the air defenses, and a couple get through and they cause a fire because they go boom on the floor, and now Ukraine is winning. Like, it's a total spin job because it ignores the reality actually on the ground. I think both conflicts we're seeing such an intensity of the propaganda, but Trump right now in the current U.S. administration is really representing how bad things can get and how misinformed we can all be when the U.S. is on the back foot and not really the front foot, because neither of these conflicts are things going well, at least for the U.S.'s stated aims. But, your final thoughts, Scott, as we close up here.
I just tell people, beware of the propaganda war. Let's just take one quick example. The other day, I think yesterday or the day before, I'm losing track of time, Ukraine struck Voronezh. They struck a defense industrial facility that makes electronics. And the headlines is that in the Ukrainians are like, we hit this because this is essential to the Russian war economy. It makes electronics to go to this missile, this missile, this missile, this system, and now we've shut it all down. And anyways, this is proof the Russians can't sustain this fight. The Russians have a deficit in air defense, and now the electronics company that produces the parts for the air defense has been destroyed, and you can't do anything. And you're just going on and on and on and on and on, not reflecting on the reality that the drones struck administrative buildings that have nothing to do with manufacturing. And so, yes, they struck an administrative building. Yes, they killed and wounded some people. None of them are the people that build the components. The factory is still fully functional and operating and generating all the components they want. The same thing with Vodkensk when it was struck, Machine Building 19. Did some damage, but it didn't shut missile production. Missile production is still ongoing. The Ukrainians are doing this huge, propaganda exercise, these long-range sanctions, they call them. And they're designed to achieve a video that generates smoke and fire and explosions, and everybody watches this. And then the ill-informed go, "Oh my God, the Russians are being beat." I'm just telling you, people, right now. I was there. You're welcome to come. I mean, the Russians will let you in. Trust me, they'll let you in. They're not ashamed. Come and see. Come and see if you have the courage, but you don't. You'll rather just sit back and listen to crap that was put out on X and on other platforms, and read mainstream media posts that are dominated by pro-Ukrainian outlets about the lies about what's happening inside Russia. Go to Russia and see it firsthand. I just did it, and you'll see that there's no panic. Of course, there's some dissent. If you want to find people who are against Putin, you can find them. I can find them. I found them. I talked to them. But the idea that they represent the majority or anything where near a significant minority is absurd. The vast majority of the Russian people are solid behind their president, solid behind Russia. The Russian economy is functioning. It could be better. I mean, hell, anything could be better. It's a war economy under sanctions, but it's growing. It's not shrinking. Russia has fully mobilized defense industry in the West in a way the West can never match. This is the reality. You need to decouple yourself from the mainstream media and from certain outlets. There's some people who say Scott Ritter's a propagandist too. Well, gosh, maybe, but I'm a propagandist governed by truth. You can go to a Russian film, Brat, Brothers. In there was a conversation between the Russian protagonist and the one of the American businessmen. The American businessman said, what is power? Money is power. And the Russian responded, no, the power is in the truth. And that's ultimately the truth. The truth will set you free, but you got to find the truth. You got to be willing to get to the truth. That's why your show is important, Danny. And I'm thankful for you bringing me on. And I would hope people will continue to support you and watch you, because you are seeking the truth. It doesn't mean we're perfect. We're capable. I'm an analyst. That means that I make 450 mistakes a day. But the beauty of being an honest analyst is to look at it and say, yeah, I got that one wrong. Why did I get it wrong? How did I get it wrong? And try to correct it, to do a better job going forward. And one of the ways that you do a better job is to make sure that your data is pure. And the best way to get pure data is to go to the source. And I went to the source. I've been 3 weeks at the source. And it was interesting. It even got a little dangerous at times, but it was worthwhile. I would have done that trip all over again, because I'm more empowered with fact-based truth today. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my insights derived from this fact-based truth with your audience.
Yeah, it's always appreciated. And I think the hopeful thing right now, Scott, and to the audience, is that, our views, and they're not views, they are based on facts. There's the more and more people in the United States are becoming, whether they're watching us or they're not watching us, they are becoming more and more aware of a very similar kind of reality on these kind of issues. And I think we would both be the first people if there was a different reality. Russia's actually losing, Iran is actually losing. We would say it. We might not be happy about it because we don't like to see the injustice of it. We know how the U.S. and Israel do things. So if Iran was actually losing, they would probably have a lot more casualties, a lot more civilian deaths, all kinds of horrible. Pezeshkian said it recently. He said, if we didn't have our missiles, we would be just like Gaza right now. So we would not be happy about it. We would be angry because there would be way more effective war crimes. Yeah, and we would say it, but because way more effective war crimes. It's the same thing. We would say it.
I talked with Russians about Russian casualties, and I had come in with 2-year-old data. And actually, I came in with data that was like, from November, when I talked to a very senior, well-placed Russian who was very honest, a military man, who talked about casualties. And I came back and reported accurately on Russian casualties at that time. And I said that the kill ratio was disproportionately in favor of Russia, and that the Russian casualties were significantly lower than what the West is saying. Now, right now, Ukraine is talking about killing 30 to 35,000 Russians a month. That's ridiculous, but they're killing a lot of Russians a month today. The war has become much more violent because of drones. Russia is suffering casualties. The other thing that's happening is that we're also learning more about how Russia calculates numbers. The Ministry of Defense doesn't lie when they put out Ministry of Defense numbers, but to understand that there's a lot of casualties out there that have been inflicted on Russia by Ukraine, by the collective West, that don't get factored into the Ministry of Defense calculations. And now the harsh truth about the reality of Wagner and the meat that was grinded up through their prisoner, parole program, where they went to prisons, emptied the prisons out, had them sign them, gave them 2 weeks training, sent them to the front lines. Wagner fought 4 big battles near the end of its time, and in each battle they lost 50 to 60,000 dead. So we're talking 200 to 300,000 dead. That's just Wagner alone. Nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about those casualties. These are significant casualties. The the Donetsk People's Militia, the Lugansk People's Militia were doing frontline service before they became part of Russia, and they lost very heavy casualties. And even lately, many of their units have taken some time to sign contracts, and so they continued to fight, take casualties, but they're not counted amongst the official Russian dead numbers. And so we're in a situation where I was briefed by somebody who's very well informed that Russia's suffered over 1 million dead. Now, that's a number that's mind-boggling. I never would have supported that number. I would have always said 300,000. That's the max that I was willing to embrace. And that number is accurate when you talk about the Russian military. But now when you have to add in the totality of Russian death, which include private military contractors that aren't factored in, the DNR and LNR that aren't factored in, the fact is Russia suffered 1 million dead. That seems to be the reality. I'm here to tell you about it. I'm not happy about it. I'm not bragging about it. I'm just basically saying that this is tough. There are villages in Russia where there are no men. All the men are dead. The villages in patriotic parts of Russia. You have republics like the Buryat Republic where they're extraordinarily patriotic and Russia leans on them and I'm not going to say takes advantage of it, but you get a lot of recruitment, and the Buryat units are on the front line, and they're paying a disproportional price. You have graveyards in the Trans-Baikal area. You go and look at the satellite photographs. These graveyards are every bit as big as the graveyards that exist in Ukraine. Nobody talks about this. But the fact is that Russia has paid an extraordinarily heavy price for this conflict. And this is a reality that has to be acknowledged.